Welcome everyone to another session of free answer writing program of Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we are going to see two questions of case studies from GS4. As you know that case study, they come with different kinds of setup. In this session, we are going to see two case studies where in one case study, we are going to see from institutional perspective that how service provider, any person who is responsible for the same, has to ensure that the consumers are given the service and there is proper trust in the system. In the second case study, we will see defects in the institution itself and how a person, a stakeholder who is part of that institution must navigate through those complex interactions. So let's start with the very first case study. The very first case study. Let's read the case study together. The tribal village in a remote area of India was facing an acute water crisis due to the depleting groundwater levels and lack of access to clean drinking water. Most of the villages depend on rainwater harvesting for their water needs, which is proving to be inadequate due to prolonged drought in the region. The villages are also facing severe health issues due to the lack of access to clean drinking water. The government has promised to provide assistance to the village, but the process is proving to be slow. The villagers are frustrated with the government's lack of commitment and have started to protest against it. The government has formed a team to provide assistance to the villagers, but they are met with resistance from local tribal leaders who are suspicious of their motives. The local tribal leaders are suspicious of the government's intentions as they have had bad experience with similar projects in the past. The leaders are concerned that the government may take away their land or exploit their resources in the name of development. They fear that government is only interested in using the village as a resource and not in providing any real assistance to the villagers. You are the leader of the team appointed by the government to provide assistance to the tribal village in a remote area of India facing an acute water crisis. Your authority, responsibility and jurisdiction are to ensure that villagers have access to clean drinking water and are provided with necessary support to address their water needs. Now let's understand the case study together. Firstly, you have to understand there is a tribal village which is facing acute water crisis. We do understand from our learning from GS that there are certain remote places in India, specifically where tribal population is residing, they are underdeveloped and they face multiple types of issues. One of them over here is acute water distress. Also, they depend a lot on rainwater harvesting, but because of the drought, they do not have sufficient rainwater storage. Now, because of such kind of issues, government, they understood that there is certain kind of possible solution, so they promised to provide assistance, but that promise was not being realized. The process was slow, and because of that, the villagers protested against such kind of lethargic actions. And for the same, government proactively ensured that they will make a team to provide the assistance to the villagers, but they met further resistance from the local tribal leaders who have experienced that government in the past have promised such kind of assistance, and in the name of that assistance, they have exploited them through grabbing their land or other resources. So that's there from local tribal leaders. Now government has assigned you as a person who is responsible to ensure that the villages, their problems with respect to water are resolved. At the same time, you also have to make sure that the local tribal leaders who are resisting against any kind of government intervention because of the past experience are also part of the solution. So that is something you have to explore over here. Let's see what exactly the questions that we have to tackle. We have to tackle two questions. How will you manage the situation and provide much needed assistance to the villagers without antagonizing the tribal leaders? And second, examine the qualities of public servant who will be required to manage the situation. So firstly, let's decode the case study again. There is a tribal village facing water shortages. Now government promised but is slow, and because of the same there are protests. Now government formed a team, but further resistance from tribal leaders because of the past government intervention and exploitation. Now you have to manage that the issue of water shortage is also resolved. At the same time, the tribal leaders are also not antagonized. Now let us solve the question together. In the introduction, you have the opportunity to talk about the overview. Over here, you can talk about how tribal population in India in past have faced issues with respect to development, displacement, exploitation. At the same time, government is also responsible with respect to providing them the basic necessities. You will talk about different stakeholders. Over here, you are the primary stakeholder who is ensuring that the responsibility is realized. The villagers who are facing the issues of water shortage as well as derived issues of the same, as in access to health care and all. And next are tribal leaders who are opposing, resisting government intervention, and then government assistant team who you're going to lead and make sure that they safely operate the program and ensure the realization of water shortage issue. So that is something in the overview you can talk about. You will write that thing in precisely 5 to 6 lines, and stakeholders, see, explicitly stakeholder is not asked. So writing stakeholder in a mind map form will definitely give you an advantage, so that the person who is evaluating your copy can understand that you have understood the entire scenario in a very explicit manner. But if there was demand to write stakeholder explicitly, you must write stakeholder along with certain explanation that how they are associated with the case. Now let's solve the first demand of the question in the body part, where you're going to write first heading as steps to manage the situation. Now, as we have understood that you are the leader, you are the person in charge, and you have to ensure every aspect of the case is tackled in such a way that there is no resistance as well as realization of the problem solution. Firstly, the very first step, I think so, as an administrator, you should operate by trusting and collaborating with the local population. By trusting as in making sure that you are reaching out with the local population, the local tribal village population, and ensuring any kind of grievance is explicitly elaborated and communicated from their side. At the same time, you are collaborating with them to ensure any resources if you need for implementation of the program to ensure water shortage is eliminated. Therefore, building trust and collaboration is the very first thing. Now, whenever you hear tribal village, you can also be innovative and apply the principles of Panchshil. Now, tribal Panchshil is a very excellent way to ensure tribal development. Over here, you can also talk about how building trust, you are making sure you are trusting the indigenous population and their innovation. Next is providing evidence and assurance. Now, over here, you are going to provide evidence, like when in past, where you have intervened for other tribal villages, you have made sure that their problems were solved without exploiting them. Thus, you are assuring them that over there you are going not with the motive or any kind of intention to exploit, but to ensure you are helping them and making sure their problems are resolved. Next is engaging local expertise. Now, this is something again in the lines with tribal Panchshil. You're making sure local expertise is used. We witnessed that how rainwater harvesting was the primary way that they conserved the water and used that water for the remaining of the year. Now, that means that local innovation is still there. Other possible ways through which that can happen by implementing different set of technology can also work to ensure the problem is solved. Next is prioritize villages' well-being. Now, villages' well-being is something which we can talk about health, right? So, water shortages definitely leads to issues with respect to health. So, as a leader, you should also try to create certain kind of health camps so that people, their holistic well-being is secured. Next is engage in capacity building. Now, this is something as a leader you will always understand that you have to make sure things are in automative modes. You cannot intervene every time issues evolve. By engaging in capacity building, you are realizing grassroots democracy. You are making sure people who are residing in the tribal village, they are politically empowered. At the same time, they are also empowered through technological ways, so that whenever issues such as water distresses or any other kind of basic necessity distresses arises, they have the nose and the ways to solve them locally. So that is how you ensure there is decentralized democracy and capacity building. So these are the steps that you can take to manage the situation. Now, to take those steps, you have to operate with certain kind of qualities. Those qualities are going to be the core values with which you are going to operate. So let us see those qualities in heading 2. Qualities of a public servant required to manage the situation. You listed out all the steps. Now, behind every step, there must be certain degree of purpose which must be derived from the values that you operate with. Now, let's see. First one is empathy and sensitivity. Without the empathy, you cannot even understand what their problems are. You have to listen to them and you have to make sure that you understand what they are feeling. Water is a very basic necessity. Once you are deprived of that kind of basic necessity, you face multi-dimensional issues, and that's why empathy must be your core value with which you should operate. So water issue or any kind of resistance with respect to exploitation, that must be ensured and transparently communicated. Next is strong communication skill. Over here we are talking about persuasion, influence. You must interact with those tribal local leaders instead of ignoring them and making sure they understand where you are coming from, as in your responsibility, your accountability. At the same time, their fear as well as their any kind of resistance they are feeling, they must also be able to pass on that information to you. How in past they face certain kind of issues by while interacting with the government institutions or civil servants, and thus communication skill should be your strong value. Third is collaboration and cooperation. Over here we are ensuring that you are collaborating with the local tribal village population. At the same time, you are cooperating with them so that you instigate your empathy. At the same time, you are making sure that the problem is solved locally, as in realization of decentralized democracy. Next is problem solving and adaptability. When we are talking about problem solving, we are talking about how innovatively you can ensure that local skill workforce can be utilized to create structures to ensure that water scarcity issue is resolved. At the same time, you must be also operating with the idea of adaptability, as in you must adapt to the situation and understand how you're going to tackle the problem in that way. Next is integrity and trustworthiness. Now, integrity is something which you have to operate because the tribals need to trust you. If you are what you are going to say, as in your values are what you're going to are in alignment with your actions, then tribal population will definitely trust you. At the same time, it will also increase the quality of your character through integrity. Next is cultural competence. You must understand the cultural context of the tribal community, as in their water needs as well as the previous exploitation that happened. So you can understand culturally what kind of values they are operating with so that you can also align with the same. Next is patience and resilience. You do have to understand when we are operating at certain remote places, logistic may be a big hurdle. So at that time, you have to be patient. At the same time, you can be resilient, as in without breaking down, without losing your mental status, you can ensure that you are providing the entire service in equanimous way. And the last is strong leadership skill, as you will be leading a team. Now you have to also pass on the crux of these values to the team members that you're leading so that they can also work and operate with certain kind of similar values so that they are interacting with the villages. They also have that kind of idea. So over here, a strong leadership skills also encompasses how you are making your vision is ready, how your steps are explicitly communicated, and how the work culture that you are going to operate with your team is all set. So all this thing encompasses as the qualities of a public servant required to manage the situation. Now let's conclude the answer. Now in the conclusion, you have the opportunity to talk about learnings for civil servants in general. You can talk about how civil servant must imbibe all the foundational values as well as other civil services values to ensure whenever they are given certain kind of problem statements, either in remote area or in urban area, they must operate with certain foundational qualities, and those qualities must have certain kind of application in the real life through recurring training or through certain kind of simulation scenarios, so that when they are in the real scenario, they can take prompt decisions and operate with certain degree of urgency. At the same time, they also aspire for excellence and make sure that the public services are realized. So that is there for question number 1 case study. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can talk about briefly the scenario of the case study. You can talk about stakeholders. As the stakeholder aspect is not explicitly asked, you can just write different names of the stakeholder in a mind map form so that you can quickly move to the main demand of the question. In here, the main demand of question is the steps to manage the situation. You can list down the steps in chronological order and also give substantiation for the same. You can also cite certain examples where you have seen that kind of steps taken and successfully applied. Next heading is qualities. Over here, you can list down all the qualities and also talk about how those qualities will help you with respect to this kind of problems. And at the end, you can talk about how certain values that we are going to learn from this case study can be applied for civil services in general and must ensured in the training as well as in their day-to-day working. So that is there for question number 1. Let's move to question number 2. Let's read the question number 2 case study together. You are a commerce graduate and have prepared for government exams for years. On being unable to crack government jobs, you have given up and taken a job in private company. The job comes as a relief after years of struggle and thus is of utmost importance to you and your family. The company offers financial advice to its investors, customers, and enjoys a good reputation in the market. The company seems to be generating very good return for its investors, customers. Lately, you have been asked to study the profile of certain stocks and analyze their performance. This report could very well become criteria for your promotion. On analyzing these stocks, you found out that the stocks are of good companies which have sound fundamentals. Before you submit your final report, you are being approached by a person who happens to be working in one of the companies you analyzed. He offered you some confidential information. You're stunned, but this information could be used by your company to generate profits for your investors. However, this information could be detrimental to the company if it comes out in public. The company which we are talking about here is the company where the person analyzes stock. The person in return for information asked for a job in your company and a meeting with the top executive. You asked for some time before arriving at a decision. On inquiring further, you came across certain facts which makes you uncomfortable. Your company is performing good because it has good connections with top executive of some companies which passes insider information to it. This helps them to beat competition and generate a good return on investment. Neither the company nor its privy group finds any wrong in this. Now in this case study, you as an employee of a financial investment organization faces certain kind of dissonance. In the beginning, you can understand from the case study that you are preparing for government exams. Unfortunately, you are not able to clear the same, and that's why you applied for certain private jobs, and after years of struggle, you were able to found certain success as in the job. Now this company, you have the idea what is exactly they are operating as in their investment company. So you are given certain responsibility with respect to learning profiles of certain stocks and analyze their performance. And from that analysis, you found out that most of the companies that were provided have certain they are fundamentally sound and thus they are good for investment. So before you were just about to submit the final report, you were approached by a person who happens to be working in one of the companies you analyzed. So from the companies which you found they are fundamentally good, one of the employee of one company approached you and that person offered you some confidential information that can help your institution, the investment institution, with respect to capturing some profit. At the same time, we also understand that if the information, the insider information comes out, that can definitely affect the company, the company which we are going to invest in a certain negative way. So that because of that kind of ethical dilemma, you ask the person to wait for the certain instance and then you will get back to the person. On further inquiring, you understood that the company which you are working have been routinely engaged in this kind of insider trading, where executive of the companies passes on the insider information and that organization, your organization invests in the same to get the best profit out of it. Now over here, you have certain kind of ethical dilemmas with respect to either should you give the information or not. And let's see what exactly the questions are. The questions are, what are the ethical dilemmas present here for an employee as in you? what are the options available to you under the given situation, and we have to also critically examine all the options listed. And lastly, what course of action you should be choosing and why. So let us just see again the timeline. So you are a commerce graduate who failed to clear the government exam. That's why you took a private job in investment organization. Now your job was to analyze certain list of companies and you found them fundamentally sound. However, a person approached to you who was part of those one of the company that you analyzed, and he offered you certain insider information. Now that insider information could definitely benefit your company but would be negative for that other company. So you took certain time to analyze the entire scenario and you found out that your company also engages in insider information, and that kind of creates a lot of hurdle with respect to going ahead. So let us see the questions and answer the same. In the introduction, you can talk about the overview of the scenario. Overview of the scenario as in you can talk about how insider trading has been visible and has been recurringly in the news for many years. We have seen that how certain kind of members of the organization, they abuse the power and get the maximum out of the same through profit maximization. So that is the kind of overview you can write over here. You can also write the stakeholders, as it is not explicitly mentioned in the question. You can just give out a brief idea through a mind map. Stakeholder as in you, the employee of the investment company, the top executives of your company as well as other companies engaged in insider trading, the individual approaching for personal gain. The next is the other employees and investor of your organization, and society at large, how exactly it impacts the entire society. So that's it for the introduction of question number 2. Now let's hit the direct demand of question number 2. The first demand is going to be the ethical dilemmas present here. So you can totally decipher the entire case study and see how exactly there is certain kind of dissonance with respect to decision making, and that is because there are certain ethical dilemmas present here. The very first dilemma that you can mention is personal interest versus personal conscience. Personal interest as in if you pass on the information, your company will definitely promote you as well as it will bring a lot of profits for your organization, which can be translated as your gain. However, there is certain issues with respect to operating with that kind of action plan. Your personal conscience might go against it because insider trading is unethical in nature and have larger negative impact on the society. Next is personal gains versus legal validity. Again, personal gains as in passing on the information will translate into profits. Next, we have seen how it is illegal to operate with respect to insider trading, and that can have negative impact for your organization as well, you. Next is family's interest versus personal ethics. As you have witnessed that you were able to capture this kind of job after long duration of failure, and because of that the success, your family is very proud of you. However, if you operate with that kind of thing, you're also violating your personal ethics, as in you might be losing out the integrity factor and operating in an illegal zone. Next is good corporate governance versus illegitimate profit generation. By passing on information, you would be part of the team who is making sure there is illegitimate profit generation. However, if you oppose that kind of information and also whistleblow with respect to your organization for inside information, you will definitely be promoting good corporate governance. And the lastly is transparency versus organizational ethics. Transparency as in passing on the information because you are just employee of the organization. Opposed to the organizational ethics over here, we are talking about that how an organization must have certain kind of ethical responsibility. At the same time, individuals of all the organization also have their ethical responsibility, and thus there is certain kind of ethical dilemma with respect to operating those action plan. So that is there for the first demand. Now let us see the second demand, which is going to be your heading 2 of the body. Now in this part, you are going to delineate all the options available to you, and you will also critically evaluate, as in you will list down the merits and demerits of all the options you have. So very first option you have is avoid the advice and resign. Now avoiding the advice as in not passing on the information, the insider information, and resigning because of the fact that you have also understood that your organization is dealing with insider information and that is unethical and illegal in nature. So there are certain merits with it. Firstly, you will be making sure that your personal ethics are realized, organizational ethics are realized. At the same time, good corporate governance is also realized. However, there are certain demerits with it. Firstly, you will be losing a job which you captured after a long job hunt. Second, your family will be also disappointed. They will depend on you. They felt that you received this kind of job after a long time and they thought that you should be continuing with this kind of services. Also, there is demerit that by going out of the job pretty soon, it may definitely hamper your future prospects. So those are the kind of merits and demerits of option number 1. Now let's see option number 2. Option number 2 is act on the advice and inform the superior, as in passing on the insider information and making sure that individual is also been given voice as in ears with respect to the top executive so that he can get a job, as well as further insider trading can also happen. So the merits over here is you will be safeguarding your job, you will be definitely getting certain kind of monetary benefit as your organization would be using their insider information and maximizing the profit from the same. At the same time, your family would be also proud. However, there is issue with respect to there are certain demerits, as in it would be illegal to do certain kind of to be part of that kind of act as in insider trading. Also, it would be harmful for the other organization whose insider information has been leaked because they were fundamentally good, but certain information can definitely sabotage the entire organization. And lastly, it is against good governance, good corporate governance values, and can definitely hamper the work culture as well in future. So that is option number 2. Option number 3. Now in option number 3, you can approach your superiors to get clarity regarding the situation and then act accordingly. Over here, instead of acting on the both extremes, as in not passing in the information or passing on the information, you approach your superiors and get certain degree of clarity that how exactly this is something legal or illegal and how exactly they should go ahead, because in future you should not be responsible for certain kind of illegal actions, and thus you should also be given certain kind of incentives for being transparent and honest. So thus over here we are talking about merits, as in approaching the superiors will give you certain degree of credibility with respect to how you are operating, your values. Also, you will understand the situation from the people directly, as in you have understood, heard from someone else that how even the top executives or organization are doing insider trading. That might not be exactly true. So by listening to your superiors, you might also understand that how exactly this is legal, illegal, at the same time how exactly it is ethical, unethical. So post that you can act in the way which is the right course. There are certain demerits as well. You might not get the right information from your superiors. They might digress you and it may hamper you in the future. Second, you must be having certain kind of wisdom with respect to when certain kind of illegal activities are going on, and also you will become very dependent for information from your superiors. So those are the kind of merits, demerits for option number 3. Now the next heading that we have to tackle is what course of action will you choose and why. So let's see that in the heading 3 of the body, which is course of action. Over here, firstly, you can opt with the option number 3. You can go to your superiors and report the same, that how a person of an organization that you were analyzing approached you with insider trading and certain other demands. Next is to make sure that there is certain verification of that insider information and also decision at that point to ensure you act in a very urgent and prompt manner. Next is reporting to regulatory authority. You do understand that from your point of view, you have to safeguard your interest, as in your ethical interest as well as your professional interest. By reporting that kind of instances directly to SEBI, you are making sure insider trading at whole is not encouraged, and people who are people who are part of insider trading, they are punished because of their illegal activities nature. And next is personal career decision. Now, next course of action is something which you have to mention over here, because you have to understand that this sector operates like this, or specifically this organization is operating with that kind of values, so that you can also make sure you proactively create a mind map for your career, so that in future you do not have to face this kind of ethical dilemmas. So that's it for the heading 3 of the body, that is course of action. Now let's see the conclusion and how exactly this is learning for civil servants. As a civil servant, you will be part of different organizations where they have seen historical corruptions, or they are presently witnessing instances of corruption, because we have seen that how corruption is kind of a negative part of bureaucracy. So for a civil servant to navigate that kind of scenario where there is certain degree of corruption happening, they must operate with certain degree of transparency with their seniors to understand the entire scenario. At the same time, they also should have the values of integrity, as in whenever there is illegal activity or any unethical activities are going on, they operate and they proactively report the same to ensure that the entire system, as in the governance, is operating with the right values, as in ethical values, and thus that model is transformed into the good governance model. So that's it for question number 2 conclusion. Let's see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can talk about the overview, you can talk about the stakeholders, the facts of the case, the objectives of the case study. You can talk about the ethical dilemmas in the body, as in heading 1. You can list down all the ethical dilemmas and you can explain the same, that how exactly the person, as in the employee, is facing ethical dilemmas. Next is options available. You can talk about the different options. You can list down the merits and demerits of all the options. And lastly, you can talk about which options you're going to choose and why rational, right? And at the end, you can talk about learnings for civil servants. At the same time, you can talk about how above steps is the summary of your action plan. So that is there for question number 2's case study. You are writing for free answer writing program of Vajiram and Ravi. Vajiram and Ravi is also initiating a mains intensive test series, which is a year-long test series where you will be getting 38 tests, and it's starting from 19th November. So subscribe the same and get mains ready. Keep writing. Thank you so much.